Are you a female in recovery from an eating disorder? Are you looking to regain your period? Do you have a desire to start a family? Well, today we may just have the perfect guest on for you. Today we have Flo with Chlo. She comes on to talk about how you can heal yourself from an eating disorder, how you can heal your metabolism. She talks about a transition from a vegan diet to an omnivore, how she recovered from an eating disorder, so much more. Let's take it away with Chlo. So welcome back to the Road to Recovery podcast. I'm your host Tommy with my great co-host Ryan. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm nifty, man. How are you doing?
I'm surviving in this crazy times.
Yeah.
Today we've got a great guest on. We've got Flo with Chlo. She's actually recovered from an eating disorder. She's a former vegan. She now helps people who are obviously struggling with eating disorders, obviously lead in their health journey. She teaches people around the world how to heal their relationship with food, their body, their metabolism, and get out of the food obsession with the chronic dieting and to get their period back as well. So thanks very much for coming on, Chlo. You're welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. That was a great introduction. That's all the things I do. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation today.
Yeah, I just thought I would obviously start out with this, just a little bit about your backstory to let the people know that obviously have maybe not heard of you before, just a little about where you've came from and to where you are at the moment in time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, my story, especially for the girls who, are struggling with an eating disorder, I feel like for a lot of us, it sort of starts at that age of like 13, 14 years old when we start sort of like going through puberty and our body starts changing and we get our period. And like, it's kind of a time too, where there's a lot of just comparison and a lot of like, pettiness and stuff in between girls. We're very sort of competitive with each other. And, that's sort of where my story started. I felt really uncomfortable in my body. I grew up with an autoimmune condition actually called vitiligo. So I have white spots on my skin. And that made me really self-conscious in my body. And so I thought, if my skin's not perfect, then like my body has to be perfect. And that's the way that I'm going to get everyone to just love me and I'm going to become popular and get the, hottest boyfriend and all of that. And so it really started out with this just desire to honestly to just look a certain way. And I have a genetic disposition to an eating disorder because my mother dealt with one and my grandma dealt with one and my great grandma dealt with one. So once I sort of went into that energy debt, which is where you're expending more energy than you are consuming, that sort of triggered that genetic response that I had for an eating disorder. And once that got triggered, that was really hard to undo because that sort of migration response that can kick in when you go through energy debt is pretty intense. It's an evolutionary response to feeling like your body is in an unsafe place. And so it started out with that, with just dieting, and then it just went too far. And I went through, it started out with anorexia and then it transitioned into fine. Okay, I will eat, but I'm going to eat only the perfect food. So then that started my journey of orthorexia, where I've probably gone on 13 or 15 different diets, everything from veganism to raw veganism to keto to paleo to pH miracle to the medical medium, the GAPS diet. I've been on so many different diets, and it was all in this like quest for achieving perfect health. Again, it was all about this perfectionism, the perfect body, perfect health. It then, over the years also turned into exercise addiction, which was another way of me trying to achieve this perfectionism. So I ended up dealing with sort of all three things throughout my teenage and then young adult years. And it really dramatically impacted my life and really, really dramatically impacted my health. I lost my period when I was 14 years old and I actually didn't get it back until I was 25. So it was about 11 years of me going without a period and really just ruining my life over this like obsession with food and with body. And I lived my life, out of fear. Everything was sort of dictated by what food is going to be available, and can I take this class at university because I want to go to the gym at this time, and now that class interferes with that. And so I said no to so many different job opportunities. I said no to so many different just experiences that I could have had because I was so obsessed with this idea of being perfect in regards to my food and body and exercise.
Wow, that totally relates to everything that me and Ryan's talked about on the podcast before. My eating disorder personally started with the loss of my mum in 1997. So it was grief that caused my eating disorder. But like you said, there is that genetic predisposition to eating disorders. And I feel, looking back at the past with my mother, she didn't have a great relationship with food. I did see that she used to always make me and my father really big, large meals, and she would go without herself. And obviously my cousins as well, they suffer with an eating disorder. So that there is that in my family. So yeah, I think we can relate to everything you kind of said there, and that kind of OCD component where everything's got to be perfect and your time's got to be regulated around eating disorder as well. What have you got to say about that, Ryan?
No, I was actually going to add to that because I thought everything she says just rings so true to like you said, both of our experiences, and probably almost anyone that's listening that's dealt with any sort of bad relationship with food. And I was talking with my mom the other day about my grandmother and her relationship with food. She's never been diagnosed with a formal eating disorder. She never dealt with extreme weight loss, but she does have really bad relationships with food in general. And it's something that I've noticed just talking to her over the last several years, where she'll continually go on these yo-yo diets of gaining some weight and then basically trying to eat nothing and trying to lose that weight, or it's just very unbalanced. And I've tried to help guide her into a more balanced mindset around those things, because you're just like in this yo-yo effect that just doesn't go away otherwise.
Yeah, I really like that you just brought up that word balance, because that really is like everything that I talk about and sort of preach on my channel, is that, you know, we really like to go to these extremes. And that's sort of for me what orthorexia was. It was like, how can I eat like the cleanest things and never, ever, ever eat a bite of bread or some sugar. And it was just so extreme in my view of thinking that like health required that. It required me to be absolutely perfect with what I ate. And now it's so funny. I just really realized that the key to health is finding that balance. It's moderation in all things. It's, eat well, have, good quality food, and also eat the chocolate croissant, have, the donut, go out and have pizza. And that's not just like something that's okay to do. I think it's something that's necessary to do. And it connects us with others when we're not, when we're against food and against what most people are eating. It's like we take ourselves out of society. We take ourselves out of that connection with other people because we're like, no, I don't eat that type of thing. So for me, I think it's so important to be able to eat all food and to release all sort of dietary dogma so that you can just sit down with any human being in this planet and just eat food, recognizing that there's so much more to that meal than just the nutrition that could be found in there. It's about the connection of sitting down with someone else. And so I really think balance is just the key to all of this, just going back to good old basics and moderation with everything.
Yeah, the thing is as well, it's really hard for people that have obviously got eating disorders because there's that much misinformation out there that people obviously saying you should follow this diet, you should be vegan, you should be keto, you should be carnivore. So there's that much confusion. It makes it so much harder. So it's great that people like yourself are out there are kind of dispelling that myth and letting people know that it is okay to listen to their body and eat what they want and nothing's going to bad that's going to come out of it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something I really resonate with, right? With all these people who are like, oh, I want to be vegan and I want to be keto and carbs are bad or meat is bad. And I get the allure of that, of like, oh, if I just do this, then everything's going to be okay. But listen, your body is strong and your body can digest food. And yes, it can digest meat. We've been eating meat for millions of years. And I think we just need to have better faith and trust in our body to be able to do this thing and to work and properly. And I always tell like my people, you said in the beginning that I help people understand sort of their metabolism, heal their metabolism. And I tell my clients this all the time, but no food is worse than any food. Like I would take, think of the worst food in your mind, fried chicken or something like that, like a fried donut, I would take that over no food any day, because my body is designed to work with food and it needs calories. And no matter what that food is, it's going to be supportive because it has calories, it does have some nutrition in it, and that's going to be better in terms of my metabolism. Because if you go too long without food, then what you're doing now is your liver's running out of glycogen, which makes your adrenals step in and go, hey, wait, we need more glucose, because our body runs off of glucose. So let's, spike cortisol so we can get glycogen, which is the stored form of glucose, out of our muscles. So then now we have super high cortisol, and anyone in the medical field understands that cortisol is very, very detrimental to our health. So by you skipping that meal, thinking that, oh, I'm being healthy because they offered me bread, and I think bread is bad, so I'm going to say no to it, and I'm just going to wait another 5 hours until I eat. Well, that right there is just the most unhealthy thing that you could have done for your metabolism and for your physiology. Eating consistently is super important, no matter what that food is. And so that's something that I really try and educate people on, is just understanding how your body works and why it is designed to work with food, with enough food, and with a variety of food.
I think that's really important. I think kind of touching on that healing the metabolism thing, because you hear a lot about that in almost any dietary space that you're in. Everybody talks about metabolism. They all have their own ideas about what is the best way to eat for your metabolism. Like there's a lot of talk about IF, intermittent fasting. And what's funny is looking back at my own kind of eating disorder tendencies, I was intermittent fasting without even really knowing I was intermittent fasting. and that's so true about the cortisol thing. I think it's so interesting. I just had my hormones and my like DHEA, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol. I had all those things checked by my doctor recently. And not only are all of them really bad, but they're all like really bad. Like it was shocking. And this is 5 years after my lowest weight, and they're still like really bad because of continued behavior and just the damage you can do in a short amount of time to your body. So maybe we can kind of talk about your thoughts around healing metabolism and kind of hormone balancing, because that is one of the problems that's aligned with that.
Yeah.
For sure. So I first off want to mention the whole intermittent fasting thing. I think it's really funny that we give fancy names for these very sort of eating disorder-esque things, right? Like I wrote a post the other day that was like, the case against intermittent fasting, aka starving yourself until 1. It's like, let's just call it what it is. It's you starving yourself. It's you skipping meals. And listen, I could argue with someone all day long about, the potential benefits or negative effects of intermittent fasting for someone. But here's the deal. If you are someone who is coming from an eating disorder past or has a current eating disorder, I'm sorry, there's no way that you can argue that intermittent fasting is good for you. Absolutely no way. You just went through a very taxing time of depleting your body of essential nutrition, of essential nutrients and calories and energy. And you're not, I tried to myself heal while being vegan and while intermittent fasting and doing all these things. And ultimately it was just impossible, because so here's what goes on. When you wake up in the morning, you're waking up because cortisol is high. So that sort of gets us to wake up and let's go out of bed. Hopefully what you do is you go and you eat breakfast. And when you eat food, that lowers cortisol. So you wake up, cortisol's high, you eat breakfast, cortisol goes down. But what happens if you are intermittent fasting, and especially if you go and do a fasted workout, is that cortisol just keeps on going up and up and up and up and up. And so now you have this extremely high level of cortisol, which when cortisol is up, your metabolism is down and sex hormones are down. So for women, estrogen, progesterone are like really, really down. And for men, it's going to be your testosterone is down. So I don't care how much you eat at that like meal at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, whatever time you deem to be okay for you to eat. cortisol's never coming down. It skyrocketed so high because you fasted in the morning that it's just no matter how much you eat, you're not getting it down. So I made that mistake of like, oh, I'm, going to eat a bunch of calories. I'm going to eat, just not in the morning and just push all my calories to the evening, which felt more safe for my eating disorder, to be just quite honest. I wanted to see how long I could go with just running on empty before I'd finally give out and I would just eat copious amounts of food, which really hindered my relationship to food too, because then it turned into this sort of binge restriction mentality. But moral of the story, I was not able to bring my cortisol levels down at all, even if I ate, say, 5,000 calories after. So that's why it's super important for you to wake up in the morning, and when that cortisol spikes, for you to eat within 20, 30 minutes of waking up so that you can bring that cortisol down, thus increasing your sex hormones, thus increasing your metabolism, which is what we want. Because a low metabolism, while diet culture has sort of taken that word to be like, if you have a fast metabolism, you're skinny. If you have a slow metabolism, you're not. Metabolism is so much more than that. And I really want to just share that, because when you go through an energy debt, aka, an eating disorder, your metabolism's shot. You pretty much go into a low metabolic state. And what happens there is your body's trying to conserve energy. So think about like when your phone is about to run out of battery and you can put it on like battery saving mode. And a lot of functions sort of don't work on your phone as well because it's trying to conserve energy. So same thing with your body. So for women, one of the first things that's going to happen is your period's going to go away, because why on earth would you spend energy to ovulate and to then menstruate and potentially get pregnant? And that's the huge thing. Like the reason why you're menstruating is your body's going to get pregnant. And so why would your body do that when it's like, I don't have enough energy to even focus on myself. I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to have to take care of the baby. So let's stop menstruation. So that's why you lose your period. People's hairs will start falling off. What else happens here? Bone density goes down. Your digestive system slows down too, because again, your body's trying to conserve energy. So a slow metabolism is going to lead to chronic GI distress. It's going to lead to insomnia. It's going to lead to imbalanced blood sugar levels. It's going to lead to brain fog, which later will lead to mental decline. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't want to be living in a low metabolic state. So it's super important that we raise our metabolism so that we have good digestion and so that our body's working at an optimal state of being, so that we're nice and warm and that we do have a monthly menstrual cycle and that our hair is not falling out. So again, it's going to be really important to make sure that we eat right away in the morning so that we can allow our metabolism to function properly. And this is something that I really wish I understood, because again, my whole journey was sort of based off of this like quest for perfect health. And so then I went out and I'm following diet culture that's telling me intermittent fast, be vegan, cut out all carbs, do all these things. And it's just so sad that I see these things online, because I'm like, that is the opposite of health, because health would be understanding how your metabolism works and understanding how important it is for you to eat enough consistently and throughout the whole day.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And one thing that I would say is there is a lot of people that I know, even friends that are in recovery at the moment, it's female, and they're really struggling to get their period back. So with that in mind, is there anything you would suggest to them that they could do to probably give themselves at least a fighting chance of getting back their kind of hormone cycling things?
100%. First off, it's really important that we don't disregard the missing menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign for us women. So it's another sign for us to see how healthy is our body. And that going away is a huge sign that something is wrong. Yeah. So just first off, I just want to say okay, this isn't something to brush aside like I did for 11 years. And then I ended up being 25 years old, wanting to start a family, and then realizing, oh, wait, I'm totally not healthy enough to do that. And so I also want to just say, before we dive into how to get your period back, that it is 100% possible to get your period back. And I know that there's a lot of confusion, especially if you go to your gynecologist, and a lot of them will just tell you, oh, we'll just put you on birth control. Yeah. And birth control is not a solution. it's not a real period. So birth control stops you from ovulating, which is a very healthy thing for your metabolism in the first place. Progesterone is very healthy. And so it's lowering your progesterone levels. It's stopping you from ovulating, which can lead to estrogen dominance. It can lead to a whole host of sort of other issues. It also can chelate a lot of vitamins and minerals from your body. So definitely do your research on the negative side effects of birth control. But then you bleed, but it's a forced bleed. So it has nothing to do with your metabolism actually working well and your period actually being back. It literally is just this pill is forcing you to bleed every month, making you think you have a period, but it's not a period, and it's not your body restored from energy debt. And so unless there is some diagnosed problem, like say fibroids or a pituitary tumor or something like that, which is very rare. So unless that is diagnosed by a doctor, you can get your period back. Now, I think it's important to understand just why your period is gone, like we were just talking about. It's gone because you're not eating enough, and your body is not going to spend the very little food that you eat on potentially growing a baby. It's just not going to do it. Its priority is beating your heart and expanding your lungs and, making sure that you walk in a straight line so that you're not bumping into things. Like, that's your body's priority. The priority is not a child. So if you are in an energy debt, so it's not just under eating, it's also exercising too much, the body's just not going to have a period. So when we understand that, why it's gone, because I'm not eating enough, because I'm stressed out as heck, because I intermittent fast and I'm going too long without meals, or I've cut out all carbs, I'm exercising, I'm doing intense workouts every single day, not sleeping well, X, Y, and Z, there's a whole host of things. Like, we look at that and we go, okay, so then the solution is going to be, I need to eat more, I need to eat a wider variety of foods, and I need to stop exercising like crazy. So there's this sort of protocol called like the all-in protocol, which is what I personally did to get my period back. And I'm sure the listeners are very familiar with this protocol, but basically, it's eat food and stop exercising.
Pretty much.
Which regardless of if you are a woman trying to get her period back, like, you can be a man and you can have energy debt, right? And it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, you have hormones too, and you can get into energy debt. And this is actually a whole nother conversation. But if you guys, do you know what relative energy deficiency in sport is?
I've heard of that term.
I've heard a lot about it, but not in detail.
Have you heard of the term female athlete triad?
Yes, I have heard of that term, yes. But I'd love for you to explain that actually to the audience, because I think that's an important one. Yeah, great. So the female athlete triad is something that has been known for a long time, that usually, we see in like athletes where they have missing menstrual cycle, osteoporosis, and then like disordered eating, right? And is it disordered eating? I'm sorry, do you know what the third thing is? I could be blanking on that. That sounded right to me, but I'm not 100%.
I'm sure it is disordered eating, but it's slightly between disordered eating and orthorexia type thing.
Yeah, so you're right. It's the missing period, disordered eating, and osteoporosis.
There you go. Okay, so that is the three. And so that used to be something that we would like look at. Those were the three measures. In the past, I think it was like 10, 12 years ago, though, we decided to step away from the female athlete triad and instead really discuss RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. And this is so great because this term really shows just like all the things that go wrong, right? Because it's not just osteoporosis, and it's not just you missing your period. It's all those things that we just talked about. It's the osteoporosis, but it's also the mental decline. It's the risk for Alzheimer's. It's the cardiovascular disease risk. It's the low thyroid function. It's peeing frequently. It's insomnia. It's chronic, bad digestion. So there's so many things that can go wrong. And so relative energy deficiency in sport, is really explaining all the sort of things that are going to go wrong when someone starts under fueling. And it's great that we've gone to this term now because it also includes men, because men can be experiencing all of this. And the female athlete triad was like, well, you know, for a man, they go, I don't have a period. So this isn't something to look at. And so a lot of doctors would overlook overtraining syndrome in men, right? But a lot of men go through eating disorders. A lot of men go through overtraining syndrome. And now having this term, Red S, can help us really diagnose men, as well as really just make this list more like inclusive as far as like all the things that will go wrong if you're underfueled. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually went through all of that. I suffered osteoporosis in the past, virtually everything that you said, really. So I can totally relate to that. And Ryan probably is exactly the same.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was actually going to get, because I was curious, I might actually get a DEXA scan soon, just to kind of see kind of all the markers. I was interested at like kind of mineral balance in my bones, but I was also interested in just in muscle mass in general, just because I know when you go through these kind of weight loss things, when you lose weight, a lot of times I think in our minds, in the anorexia mind, we're like, oh, we're losing fat, but it's like we're losing tons and tons of muscle. We're losing tons of lean mass. Yeah, but it's interesting with the thyroid and stuff like that, because I had all that checked and it's like, yep, I'm low. Yep, I'm low. And I'm on like temporary hormone replacement until I get fully weight restored, really, to really get working on those things. But I think something to kind of go along with that would be the discussion around when you work with physicians on this. When they look at me, I don't think I ever had a physician, except for when I was 88 pounds, tell me I had an eating disorder or acknowledge that I might have an eating disorder. So maybe we can kind of talk around, and we've done this in the past with people like Tabitha Farrar and Talia, who's been on the podcast before, eating disorder nutrition coaches. But just kind of the dogma just in the medical community and under recognition of these problems in people that don't look underweight, and maybe they're not necessarily underweight, but they are still doing these behaviors, therefore experiencing some of the side effects.
This is why I created Flow with Chlo. It's to really educate people, because listen, I love doctors. My brother's a doctor. My sister's an ER nurse. My grandpa was a doctor. I have a lot of people in the medical profession in my family. And you learn so much in medical school, and you can't possibly learn everything. And unfortunately, eating disorders is something that they don't really learn about. My brother, you know, maybe heard about anorexia like once in one of his classes, and he went through like 9 years of medical school. So I think, you know, no matter what we're dealing with medically, I think it's really important to inform ourselves, go through, you know, books and podcasts and articles and Instagram pages and get education, learn about your body. And I think also just, you know, I have a lot of clients who they go to their doctor and they get even like lab work done, and the lab work will come back fine. Like, oh, well, your T3 levels are fine, but they don't feel fine. And I'm like, okay, you shouldn't wait for a doctor to validate you and you not feeling fine. You should be able to stand up for yourself and know like, hey, something's not right in my body, and really voice those concerns. And if need be, you might need to find another doctor if that doctor's not really listening to you. So trying to think what else I sort of wanted to say with that. I think just empowering yourself to understand your body and be able to then, you know, make the correct changes in your lifestyle is super important.
I think it kind of takes us back to that kind of stigma that you've got of that anorexic look to actually have an eating disorder, when in reality, eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes, and every demographic can suffer an eating disorder. So that's something we've discussed a lot about. Yeah.
No, 100%. And it can be really hard for those people who are in a quote unquote normal sized body, right? When they're dealing with anorexia. I have had a couple clients in that very similar boat, and it's hard for them because they're like, well, I don't know, am I actually sick enough to get help? And
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And I hate hearing that, because I'm like, listen, you just listed off for the last like hour all these things that are going on in your life that is just like really just holding you back. And that's, you just cried here for the last hour explaining all these things. And then it's so sad to see that we have been sort of, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but it has just sort of been like, we think of anorexia as super skinny white girl.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because then these girls who are dealing with the same thing, they go, well, I'm not a super skinny white girl, so this is not what I'm going through. And that's really unfortunate because then it just really impacts them and how they feel. They feel so shameful that they're like going through all of this and they don't know what it is. And so, yeah, for anyone listening, you can be any size or shape or color and struggling with an eating disorder. And that's important to understand because I think part of the journey of healing is awareness, and it is accepting like, yeah, I have an issue. And that's why it took me so long to heal, because for 11 years, I was like, I'm totally fine. I'm healthy. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me.
To that,
yeah, people would voice opinions and I'd be like, no. Trust me. Like, I'm vegan. I'm totally fine. I'm healthier than you. And yeah, but
that's one thing that I actually want to touch upon when you're actually talking about being vegan. What actually led you to go to veganism? For myself, it was obviously ethical reasons, but I had to leave around the 4-year mark because the first 2 years were really, really good. My health was just going basically on the incline from there. Then I got to about the 3rd year, I started to suffer brain fog, short-term memory loss. They actually thought I had a stroke because I was kind of slurring my speech and my whole left side was all crooked. And I was suffering gut issues to the extent that I would be going to the bathroom up to 16 times a day. My weight loss started to kick in. I actually had to leave due to doctors advising me to go back to an omnivore diet. From there, even though I was all about vegan activism, people obviously lashed out at me and attacked me for that, which I can understand because I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, it's hard for us. So what was your kind of journey like for going to veganism, and what led you to leave veganism?
Yeah, first off, I just want to mention something because I grew my Instagram channel off of like being vegan, and I had like 20K followers the day eggs I came out to my following, being like, listen, my health is really declining. I gotta do something on. I'm gonna start eating animal products. And I immediately just got attacked by it was awful. And here I am, girls, I don't my hair's falling out, all these things are happening, and I'm really not feeling well. And so I think I'm gonna try and experiment with doing something else. Just the vegan community attacking. And we're all right. They followed me because I really intend to leave veganism. But what got me into it was, well, I think it was when I was younger, and I had developed vitiligo, which again is the white spots on my skin. And my brother, he actually dealt with orthorexia, and he was dealing with a lot of health issues himself. And so he got into this diet called the pH Miracle, which is pretty much an all vegan diet. And so we started like making huge salads for breakfast and big quinoa bowls with flax oil, and that was the first time I went vegan. And then that only lasted like a year before my family finally was like, you can't do this. Like, no, you have to eat meat. We're not allowing it. And I'm really glad that my mom really like stood up for that and was like, no, like, I'm not going to let you just wither away here. Unfortunately, my orthorexia just continued, and it went on. But I eventually, when I went back to school in university, I met a bunch of friends. They were vegan. I started listening to all these podcasts again, started reading all these books, started following all these, beautiful vegan influencers who live out in Hawaii, and they're drinking, acai bowls and celery juice all day. And it was really
lifestyle.
It's really alluring, right? And so I just really got stuck in it again, and my mind really nutritional. It really feeling like I'm doing everything right. And so, if I look back at like my YouTube search history from back when I was vegan, I probably listened to like 10 or 12, YouTube videos or podcasts a day on veganism. Like I was obsessed with it. And I totally thought it was like the perfect way to eat. And so I ended up, joining the vegan and environmental like club at school. And I ended up like running that for a little bit. I would, come home and I would tell my family, oh, it's so bad that you're eating butter. Why are you eating meat? And it was really contentious, actually. I really pulled away from my mother for so many years because of my dietary beliefs. But yeah, it kind of just became like a religion for me. And I eventually got to this place, though, where my health was just so bad. And I had worked on my relationship a lot. So I started eating more. I wasn't anorexic anymore, stopped exercising so much, but still exercising quite a bit, but nothing like abnormal for how unhealthy I was. But for just like someone who had a healthy metabolism, exercising that much, like it was fine. It was like, 5 days a week for like an hour. So it wasn't like obsessive as it used to be. And I was trying to heal being vegan. And I totally thought that I could. I was like, I'm going to, be super, super healthy and I'm going to try and gain some weight. I'm going to get my period back, all of that. And well, lo and behold, 5 years later, here I was still vegan, still very unhealthy. I also massive so it was just, in a way, it was just a socially acceptable way for me to restrict all the food that I, in reality, was really fearful about. But I started, going through this really awful binge and restrict cycle, and my digestion was absolutely just awful. And I think that actually was like the big thing that got me, was like my digestion started getting so bad towards the end of my vegan journey, and I became so repulsed by vegetables and quinoa and tofu. I literally couldn't eat anything, and then I would just binge on like 3 bars of chocolate because that's all I would allow myself to eat. And I finally I broke down and was like, I can't do this anymore. And I went and we have chickens, so we have like 12 chickens on my property, and I went up to the chicken coop and I got 4 eggs. And I made a 4-egg omelet and I buttered my toast back and forth, and I literally took a bite of those eggs and boom, it was like everyone was awakened and I cried. Like I literally just bawled my eyes out at how good the eggs tasted. And I thought I was going to go slow, and I was like, I'm just going to have eggs, maybe I'll add in a little bit of cheese and dairy and all of that. But by that night, literally like that night, I found myself in Whole Foods in the meat section on the phone with my sister being like, what type of meat should I buy? I don't know how to cook it anymore and all this, and just being like staring at this meat being like, I need all of this. And I made my first steak that night in like 5 years. And again, it was no stopping it. My body wanted meat, it wanted animal products. And so I started incorporating that all back in, and eventually, 2 months later, I decided to completely quit exercise. And a month and a half after quitting exercise, that's when I got my period back for the first time in 11 years. And so it was quite the journey, but sort of going back to something that we were talking about earlier in regards to like how to get your period back. I want to tie this into the whole veganism thing, because I know a lot of people get stuck on this diet and they think that they can recover fully vegan. And I just want to raise the flag of like, of caution here. When you go through an energy debt and when you lose your period, your body's severely depleted, and eating a diet that is very restrictive and already lacking in so many vital nutrients like B12 and choline and vitamin A in the form of retinol. And there's so many things, right? Like non-heme iron versus heme iron. So you need heme iron and you don't, I shouldn't say you don't need non-heme iron, but there's 2 different sources of iron from plant and animal foods. And so a lot of the vitamins that you think that you're getting on, a plant-based diet, you're not even really getting the forms that you need them in. And so to try and eat a diet that is wholly inadequate as far as nutrition while you're severely depleted is so dangerous in my mind and nearly impossible. And that's, I was trying to do. I was trying to recover while eating lots of vegan food. But no matter how much I ate of vegan food, I was so depleted in B12, even though I supplemented religiously. But I had really bad sort of nerve damage happening in my feet and in my hands. And that, unfortunately, for many people is irreversible. And I have some clients that have full-on neuropathy from it because they just simply thought that veganism. Yeah, you got that. Yeah. And it's sad and it sucks and it's painful. And I wish that the vegan community really talked about that more, about the serious negative side effects of a vegan diet, because there are many. And I think, if you just type into YouTube, like why I'm ex-vegan or ex-vegan videos, you will see thousands and thousands of people sharing their experience with having sensitive teeth, complete mental decline, breaking their bones a lot, having hair loss, having chronic digestive issues, and having sort of gray skin and not being able to maintain a healthy weight. Like, a lot of people really start deteriorating on the vegan diet quite quickly, but it can also take a couple years before they get that decline. So yeah, that would just be my red flag there. Just, if you're trying to recover while being vegan, it's going to be, in my mind, impossible. Not only for the mental reason. Like, for me, recovery is finding food freedom, being free, being able to eat any and all food, being able to travel, being able to go to my mom's house and just thank you so much for this, food. I'm so grateful. I'm going to enjoy it without guilt, shame, or regret and anxiety. And I just don't see how that is possible when you are sticking to a strict diet that cuts out eggs, dairy, meat, seafood, so many key ingredients in so many dishes. So I not only think that it's inadequate nutritionally to help you, restore your body from being malnourished, but I also think that mentally it's not doing you any favors by trying to stick to a very rigid, dogmatic diet.
I think as well we can say the same probably for things like keto, carnivore, paleo. They're all the same, I mean, it's just restriction in another form that's socially acceptable.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm actually glad you brought up some of the stuff about bioavailability and nutrients, because those are some things that I think a lot of people don't understand when they're going on either a really plant-based diet or a vegan diet. You need certain things like choline's important for cognition and other aspects. And yeah, like you mentioned with the retinol, active form of vitamin A, and heme iron versus the other forms of iron. So I think that's all really important.
And to just expand on that a little bit, if the listeners aren't aware, do you mind if I just give an example of that?
Yeah, go for it.
So I hear so much in the diet community or diet culture sort of community that kale has so much calcium. I see it in memes everywhere, and it really irks me because I'm like, okay, under a microscope, and this is just important to understand, because just because something's there doesn't mean that our body can digest it. So if we look at kale under a microscope, we do see calcium, but we also see this thing called oxalic acid, oxalates, and oxalic acid will bind to calcium. Our body, our human body, cannot digest or assimilate oxalates. So what happens is, because now all that calcium is bound to the oxalate, it goes right through us. It's very hard for our body to be able to break that down, to actually utilize that calcium. So like you're mentioning, we have to look at the bioavailability of those foods. Plant foods, I'm not saying fear them, I'm not saying never eat them, but they do have natural anti-nutrients, phytic acids and oxalates and things like that that just really make it hard for our body to digest and assimilate those foods. But if we look at, say, animal products, 100% bioavailability. So the calcium I get in milk is in the form that my body can readily use. And so it's really important that we are incorporating a bunch of animal products into our diet so that we are getting bioavailable forms of nutrition and not making it so hard on our body to try and digest through all that fiber and all the cellulose that's found in the plant foods to finally get to the very little amount of nutrition that is there.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've talked about. So, oh man, that's gonna be a blown out me yelling in the post. But that's something that we've talked about so much on the podcast with other people that we've had on. Even we've had some people with more extreme views on diet and stuff like that, like carnivore and veganism. I've talked to some people, but the one thing that I do think is a universal, at least preach, even if it's not necessarily 100% correct, is you need to be getting the most bioavailable forms of these nutrients that you can. Of course, they argue about what that is, and I believe you're correct on this one with animal products for some things, especially when it comes to like things like calcium and these anti-nutrients that do bind to things like oxalates and other types of stuff. They're like lectins and a few other things that bind. So they're all things you need to consider. I think something that is also important is I've talked to people in the kind of anorexia eating disorder community who they get into this stuff like we have, and then they get so paranoid about it that they kind of don't do any action as well. So again, it's like this, how do we find this balance when we're getting all this information, and while maybe it's valuable, it's also, excuse my language, a mind F. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, so that's really interesting because it's like, yeah, you can read all this stuff about like the anti-nutrients found in plants. And I know a couple communities like, you know, the carnivore community or even the repeat community who is like it's like they go anti-vegetables. And I know that can be really easy for people when they start researching that to now go, oh my gosh, I can never have a nut. I can never have a vegetable. I can never have like any of this stuff because of the anti-nutrients. And I just, again, and you already reiterated that, like balance, people, balance, like your body is strong. I like to take with everything diet, I like to take a very zoomed out perspective. So if I zoom out for like, say the last year and I look at the food that I'm eating, I'm going to see, you know, lots of grass-fed beef. I'm going to see my, you know, chickens, eggs from my house. I'm going to see raw milk. I'm going to see, you know, I'm going to see rice and fruit and all these things. Now, if I zoom in, yeah, I'm going to see the churros that I had the other night with my friends at her house. I'm going to see the, you know, chocolate croissant I had the other day. I'm going to see like all these things, and that's fine. And it's okay. And even with like the vegetables, it's like, okay, so I understand my metabolism now. I understand that just filling up my body with a bunch of vegetables every day and being what I like to call a vegetable abuser is not healthy. Like I know just having salad and nothing else is not going to be supportive for my body. It doesn't go in fear salad anymore. I'm going to reshuffle the balances. So instead of having just a big bowl of salad with like a little bit of like, you know, tofu in it or something, now I'm going to have a nice steak, some potatoes, and a side salad. And I'm going to just bring more balance to my whole meal. I'm not going to eat copious amounts of vegetables. I'm going to understand that, hey, there's a lot of nutrition in milk and cheese and steak and, you know, chicken and all these food, that it's okay for my meal to not have any vegetables. So it comes down to just big picture. Look at what are you eating? Are you eating just a balance of foods? Are you, you know, not being extreme in any one area? Like, don't go all carnivore on me. Also, don't go all plant-based on me. Like, why don't we just do a little bit of both and see how our health goes with that? And yes, there are anti-nutrients in broccoli, but hey, I'm going to cook my broccoli really well. I'm going to put a lot of butter on it and some salt, and I'm going to enjoy it alongside my salmon and alongside my rice. And it doesn't have to be something that like I fear, but it's also just something that I understand it's not going to be wise for me to make like spirulina noodles from zucchini and top that with broccoli and top that with almonds and top that with like,
I've done that.
all these things. Exactly. And I have too.
Definitely done that.
And it led to bad digestion and it led to low thyroid function. And so, yeah, your thyroid, your metabolism really needs these bioavailable foods. So I like to always just focus on making sure you are adding in those stuff and not necessarily taking out. It's just, okay, instead of always using, say, almond butter, I don't tell my clients not to use almond butter. I tell my clients, hey, I really want you to start using cream cheese or to use butter and to start just creating more balance in your diet here. So that, yeah, because we can look at almond butter and go, it's hard to digest. There are a lot of phytic acids and there's a lot of anti-nutrients in nuts and seeds, but we don't have to be obsessed with never eat it. But I think it's just understanding that all foods can exist in our diet. Let's just do it in a balanced way. And let's listen. This is really important. Let's listen to the signs of our body. If you're having really bad digestion and you're vegan, maybe you're eating too much fiber. Maybe you need to start incorporating things like the eggs and the steak and things like that are going to be easier on your body to digest. So your period's gone. You're not sleeping well. Your digestion's crap. Okay, let's understand that despite how many, nutrition articles you read online saying that way of eating is good for you, it's not good for you if your body's showing those signs. And that is what I had to finally come to terms with at the end of my vegan diet was, okay, I know that there's Rich Roll out there who's talking about veganism. I know that there's, Dr. McGregor. I know that there's all these people who've written all these books and done all this research on how great veganism is. But me, in my body right now, I'm eating a vegan diet and I feel like crap and I have to listen to that. And I started eating animal products and now I feel absolutely amazing. And it's been almost 2 years now that I've had a monthly menstrual cycle, all from just adding animal products back into my diet. And so I listen to my body now. I listen to, hey, if I eat this, does this make me feel good? Does this not? Is my overall metabolic health, is it in a strong, good place? Yes, great. Okay, what I'm doing is good. No, all right, what can I change? Am I eating too many just low-calorie vegetables? Do I need to start in desert? Because, hey, that's what your body needs and that's what your metabolism needs. So I think it's weird for us to hear that like meat and potatoes can be healthy because what we hear online is broccoli and asparagus is healthy. But I think it's time to really start changing the conversation there and realize that we as humans have been eating meat and animal products for millions of years. Like I think I had my client research it the other day. I was like, type in, like, how many years have we been eating eggs? And literally 6 million, like 6 million years humans have been eating eggs. And now the vegan community wants to just say that eggs are toxic and that they're bad for us. I'm like, what? Like that goes against evolution. That goes against everything that we've been doing for the last millions of years. And so I think you also have to just recognize that, while we hear veganism talked a lot in the mainstream, it's an experiment and that there is no other civilization on the planet that has survived off of a vegan diet. And so you are experimenting with your body if you are going on a vegan diet. And for many people, that experiment does not end well, which is why we have such a high rate of ex-vegans.
Yeah, the way I look at it as well, a lot of people says, well, the studies say this, the studies say that. But at the end of the day, I feel your anecdote trumps all of that because it doesn't matter what any study says if it doesn't replicate for you in the real world. And that's what I try to explain to people.
Sorry, you just cut out a little bit there. Can you just say that last sentence again?
Yeah, what I was trying to say there is a lot of people obviously say that the studies say this or the studies say that, so this diet should work for you. But the way I look at it, your anecdote trumps all of that because it doesn't really matter what a study says if it doesn't replicate for you in the real world.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're so unique. All of us, we have different DNA, different genes. And also we got to keep in mind, we have different like cultural backgrounds and that plays into health. So for example, I'm French. Me saying no to butter and cheese is like, it tears me apart from my family. It tears me apart from my culture. And so that also, impacts my health. One, I have good genes to digest dairy because I am French. So my body needs that type of food. And then two, also just like socially and culturally, like that really impacts me if I'm just not eating in a way that that is in connection sort of with my family and my roots. And I think that that is really important to keep in mind. But in regards to the like nutritional studies, listen, I studied public health in university and I have taken many epidemiology classes, and really studying how nutritional studies are done was really eye-opening for me, to be quite honest.
I was going to bring that up, so I'll have you talk about that, because epidemiology is a really shaky science.
Yeah, it's the bottom feeder of this, the studies, basically.
Well, is it a science? Because it's like all we would do in public health is we would send out to someone a survey. Yeah, of like, in the last year, how much like meat did you eat? It's not paying. First off, who can remember that? Second off, like, people lie in those things, because when you're asking someone about their diet, they love to say like, well, I ate lots of this and I ate lots of that. But thirdly, it's not even looking at quality. It's not looking at the other factors of health. Like, there's so many things where I'm like, this is just, it's not an accurate representation at all. And so, yeah, we have to be really mindful when we read, studies, but also understanding that there's usually money backing those studies, and we got to look at where that money's coming from. And, I was arguing actually with a friend the other night, because he was like, don't you believe in science? I'm like, nah. So science is always right, because science is very biased, because we humans are doing science. And, there are lots of studies that have just been paid for by organizations that want results. And so the research is going to be done in a way that shows that. And we see that a lot in like the China study, where he really sort of he misinterpreted a lot of the studies that were in there, that it's like, was it really they are like vegan? Like, when we studied, the blue zones in school, it was really shocking for me, because all I hear in the plant-based community is that the blue zones are
that's a shitty,
they primarily, that's why they're so healthy. And I heard that in the vegan community so much. But then I took a whole class on the blue zones in school, and I was really shocked, because I was vegan at the time and I was learning this stuff, and I'm like, wait a minute, they eat so much pork, like a lot of pork, like most of their dishes have pork or egg in it. And same with, the Seventh-day Adventists, where they may serve vegetarian food in their cafeteria, but not a lot of Seventh-day what did I just call it? Seventh-day Adventist. Thank you. I'm like, why am I blanking on that? They actually aren't vegan. It's only like 30% of the community is like vegetarian. Don't quote me exactly on that percentage, but it's a very low percentage that is actually full-time vegetarian. So yeah, we have to be really just mindful when we look at nutritional studies, which is why I just go back to basics. What was my grandma eating? Oh, she was eating bacon and eggs and butter, and she got milk from the farm, down the road. And okay, I'm going to be eating those type of foods in a non-obsessive way, because I also understand I'm in the 21st century and there are things called like, Oreos and things like that. And I'm going to incorporate those into my diet as well, because I do not believe in being obsessive. But, for the principles that I create for my diet, I just go back to, what was my grandma eating? She had bread with cheese. I'm not gonna mess with that.
Exactly. Just keep it simple. Yeah. But one thing I was going to touch upon just for the last type thing was, we obviously talked a lot about exercise in this podcast. This is something me and myself and Ryan have kind of suffered with a lot, exercise addiction. If people come to you represent with exercise addiction, what is it you kind of help them with to try and get them out of that cycle, to try and heal their relationship with exercise and obviously their body?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to that, right? There's some root issues here of like, why are you going into the exercise? A lack in self-confidence, a distrust in the body, a fear of weight gain. There's so many things going on there. So first off, like, I really like to address those sort of like bigger key things. But as far as like healing wise, I do eventually get with all my clients to a place where they completely get off of exercise. It's a slow process. For many of them, we start just eating more, and that tends to be a lot easier for a lot of people. And then once they start eating more, and as they, sort of nutritionally rehabilitate their body, their brain starts to normalize. So that's important to recognize too. That's like, you're in this migration response. And I'm sure Tabitha Farrar, if you guys talked to her, she talked a lot about that. But like, it's going to be really hard to like not want to move when you're in migration response. So the best way to get out of migration response is to eat more food, to tell your body like, hey, we're not in the desert right now. We don't need to be, running across the whole world to try and find the land of abundance. Tell your body, I'm in the land of abundance right now. I don't need to be moving. So the first thing I do is I help them increase their calories. And I think that's really important. And that will help also sort of just change some things in their brain. So that by the time we get to, hey, let's start reducing our exercise, it's a lot easier for them. So I also just love to, with my clients who are doing a lot of running and weightlifting, I like to have them first start off with like, hey, let's change those 2, weight training sessions that you have a week. Let's make that dancing. I want you to put on music and I want you to dance in your room. I want them to embody the feminine. I want them to start understanding that movement doesn't have to be this mechanical thing, but it can be this organic thing that just feels good. But eventually I do want to get everyone to the place where they've completely eliminated it, because I think it's really important, not only physically to allow your body to completely restore, to really get those cortisol levels down, but I also think it's just so important for your mental health to really develop those tools to feel good in your body, to have a healthy relationship with food that is totally disconnected from exercise. And as long as you're exercising, there's still going to be, I feel like, that just connection with how much I ate and how much I exercise and what my body looks like. And I want you to be able to disconnect that so that you can eat freely. And I think it's also just, I know for me, completely taken off of exercise, that was a time for me to learn different ways of coping with things. It was a time for me to also, really learn that like, hey, I'm okay without exercise, because it's one thing. And I see people do this all the time. They talk about it. Oh yeah, I can eat Oreos. That's fine. It's all about balance. And oh yeah, I don't have to exercise and all that, but then they don't actually do it. And I'm like, it actually means nothing unless you actually just start experiencing it. So I'm like, I need you to actually experience what it's like to completely go off of exercise, so that in the future, when someone goes, let's go travel on a boat for the next 3 months in the Caribbean, you can go, yeah. And you're not thinking about, oh no, but I'm on a boat and I won't be able to walk and I won't be able to run and I won't be able to go to the gym and do all these things. That's going to block you in your life. So I want you to be completely free from this. And I think that the way to become completely free is to completely take it out and to recognize, wow, I am fine without exercising. My body doesn't like go crazy. And I don't need to rely on that to make me feel good or to allow myself to eat food. There's lots of things that we do to get them there, but eventually I just want to get everyone there to that point. And then after you're restored, after you have your, your period back, after you have a healthy relationship to food, you're at a good weight. If you were underweight, your metabolism is showing all the signs of good health. Then we can start incorporating exercise back in hopefully a very healthy way. And hopefully you've learned how to now take care of your body better and understand its signs.
No, I love that. I mean, the exercise thing has probably been like the hardest pill for me to swallow. That was probably my biggest detriment in my entire journey with anorexia, and to a point still is. In fact, I'm a huge hypocrite. So like most of the time I actually hate talking about it, because there's so many things that I still have to catch myself doing. But I think that's part of the healing journey is learning what your behaviors are, what your triggers are, and what things set off certain activities in your mind that lead you to be compulsive. And I think that's beautiful, the way you just put it about leading people to recognize those behaviors and then eventually eliminate some of those behaviors for a time, because they need to really restore not only their body, but their mind. And so kind of as we go out of this podcast, I'd love for people to know where they can find you, reach out to you. And there's so many people that could learn and I think grow from just looking at your journey on your page and following you.
Yeah, for sure. The best place to follow me, honestly, is Instagram, because I'm there every single day. I'm in my stories. I answer to my DMs. I answer to every single comment on my post. And I do spend a lot of time making really great posts to really educate you guys. So my page is more than just pictures of me. It's a lot of really good information on there. Yeah, it's information, it's education, it's me sharing my experience, it's me teaching you about like your metabolism and your period and why it's important to get it back. So definitely follow me there. But also, you know, YouTube is a great place to listen to sort of more long form me topic, but also my podcast. So everything's just going to be flow with Chlo, and I'm eventually coming out with a course to really help women get their period back, restore their metabolism, and heal their relationship to food. And that course is going to be jam-packed with so much good stuff, and just it's going to, you know, provide a community and a support group for all these women specifically who are trying to get their period back and restore their body. And so look for that, and find out all that again is going to follow me after with Chlo.
Beautiful. Well, I'd like to thank you again because this was really insightful. And I'd love to have you back on at some point to go into depth into some of these topics, just for a one topic podcast and really get into the nitty gritty, because I find it so fascinating. I'd love to do one with you on dogma. I think that's a huge topic we could cover. But I just want to thank you again. And again, implore everyone to go check her out. And we will see you all in the next one.